You're in charge now.
Right. Thank you.
Welcome.
What he said. I don't know what he said. Was he talking trash about me? Was he talking bad? I don't know. So I am also going to speak in English, but I am from Texas originally. So I might get a little Texan on you occasionally. So that may be tough for the translators, those that are listening to the... I thought about actually bringing the translation device out here, and then I could say a few words, and then I could just say it to you, whatever he said, right? But I don't know if that wouldn't go so well. So today we're going to talk about designing for mice and men, and the reason I give this topic is, for so long we focused on the mouse and the Windows interface, not just Microsoft Windows, but Windows in general. And now we have the ability to also, use our fingers, our limbs. So it's mice and men, but it's also women too. I don't want to be sexist here. Designing for across the spectrum. So I was at Netflix the last 4 years. I just left about a month ago and went to PayPal. Much of the talk I'll give today will be inspired by a lot of things we were doing at Netflix, and they are doing at Netflix. There I led the user interface engineering team. At PayPal, I'm heading up all the web development for PayPal, and we're trying to change the way people think about money, which is rather than thinking about movies, now it's about money. So Netflix, for those that don't know, we're in Brazil now, and they're in Brazil, I should say. I still want to use the we because I was there so long. But it started as as DVDs by mail, and had a single website. When I started in 2007, that was it. It was when we would go to our leadership meetings, it was talking about the efficiency of shipping a disc to our customers. It was talking about breakage rates, how many times you could turn a DVD and make money. So the whole economics was around DVDs being shipped out through the Postal Service. And it was all the United States. It's all just within one country. But it changed a whole lot in the last few years, streaming on hundreds of devices. So quite a change we saw and we went through for those 4 years, going from DVD shipping, a single website, to having to support devices in many, many forms. When you look at this led to an explosion of experiences. When you have 400 different devices that your experience is on top of, and you did not develop most of those experiences or design most of those experiences. You gave them style guides, you influenced them, you gave them sample starter kits to get a genesis kind of going, but you did not own the experience. And this was something that was definitely problematic for Netflix, because Netflix has built its business on a very strong A/B testing, quantitative testing environment where we could field many, many ideas and get them out within a week or two, see what the results were, and we based those on some real clear business metrics, things like consumption. I mean, if you're going to have a successful movie business, you want to know that people are actually consuming, getting value out of your service. And what you really want to do in a subscription service is have people not quit on you, not cancel. You want them to keep letting the money go on their credit card or their financial card and keep having that happen. And that's really the bottom line business thing called retention. But you can't measure retention when you do something in the UI directly. So you have to have a proxy metric, something that stands in for that. And that is something like consumption. In the DVD world, that was easy. Well, it was not so easy. I should back that up. It was not easy because I would ship you a disc, and you may, a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, watch that. So what did we do on the website that actually influenced that? Well, the decision to actually put it in your queue, the list, the DVD movie queue, was what we would measure. So the metric was really around adding to the DVD queue. Now in this new world, it becomes around people actually watching something, engaging, say for more than 15 minutes or some other metric. So we had this dilemma with so many different experiences. So what do you do? Well, so Netflix, is known for valuing the user experience. It's something that we put a high commodity on. And if you don't do the experience, you don't own the experience, you can't have that high quality. And we also believe strongly in A/B testing. Believe that Agile is better than the rigid firmware process. When you put something on a device, a Blu-ray player, a TV, Samsung doesn't want, by default, to have things change every couple of weeks. They want it to stay stable for 6 months, a year, 2 years. That's been their business forever. So there was also a big cultural shift to get them to think beyond that and to think of more of an agile experience. And then the ability to learn fast, fail quickly. For those of you that have been keeping score on Netflix, you may know of the Quickster situation, the split and the unsplit of Netflix. We failed fast and learned quickly. Google's had to do the same thing, right? With Buzz and Wave and other things like that. You fell fast and learned quickly. Now you have Plus. Much, much better iteration of it, right? I know Bradley Horowitz real well, so I have to give the props there. Yeah. Yeah, his boss, yeah. So when you look at the experience across devices, excuse me, sorry about that. Can you translate that? I've had this tickle in my throat. What should I do? I just cover the mic. When you look at the experience across devices that Netflix owns, there's a little more similarity, and more and more similarity will happen over time. And the reason for this is, of course, we're going across 4 different channels: web, tablet, mobile, and TV. But each of these has something in common. They have a browser technology underneath them, and 3 of them have some form of WebKit. On the TV, on the game consoles especially, and TVs, we're using both Nokia's Qt WebKit and Google's Skia WebKit as a foundation, which allows us to create an HTML5 experience across those channels. And that is really beneficial because having a platform that we can push out across all these devices that allows us to then have very fast iterations of experimentation. Which is really, really powerful. But, when you look across devices, things do change. There are different constraints. And so if you look at the web, we've got the mouse. It's kind of really indirect if you think about it, because you're not directly doing it. You have this other device. You have a keyboard. You don't have voice necessarily, although that's changing. And you have windows and controls instead of content. So you have the input, navigation, posture, and display. On the TV, we have left, right, up, down, so you just got a real simple control. Again, that's changing over time with Microsoft's 360, with the Kinect, the voice user interface, the natural user interface with Kinect. But when you're trying to design right now for what the space is, you have these constraints. A lot of it is pain-based, a lot of pains. People's posture is leaned back and relaxed and much more in a media consumption mode. And the resolution's high, but it's far away. So you have to think about typography, making things big enough. Mobile resolution's high, but you're closer up, so you can have smaller fonts actually. And then your gestures are input-based as well as tablet. So when you think about input, navigation, posture, and display, those are the 4 areas that when you look across devices, you have to think about the changes that happen in those different channels, and those become your constraints when you're designing. And I think constraints are really one of the most powerful things in the design world. If you're following Luke Wroblewski's work, somebody in the States, he has a book called Mobile First. And there's a whole movement around designing for mobile first. And really what it is about embracing constraints first when you do design. When you can do anything, it makes it a really challenging problem. But when you have some constraints, like in the mobile space, you've got a smaller display, you can have less features. That's a good thing. At Netflix, one of the things we talked a lot about was keeping as few features as possible in the interface. somewhat, akin to what Google does too, like trying to keep things pretty simple. We would call them barnacles. You know what a barnacle is? It's, when on the bottom of a boat, when there's formation from I don't know what it's formed from, but it gets hard, and to scrape it off, you have to get like a chisel, and that's what features are like. When you get a feature in a product, trying to get rid of it is like getting this crew out there on the bottom of a boat and begin to try to scrape off the barnacles, right? Nobody wants to remove it. People have invested their careers in it. There's even groups maybe that support it in an organization. So we were pretty relentless about trying to get rid of features. If you design for constraints first or mobile first or TV and put those in mind, they force you to think about simplicity, which is a good thing. So choosing a portability layer was a luxury that I'm sure that not everyone in the room has, but you do have the capability to think about an HTML5 strategy where you have a native app that wraps, and some portions of the content especially can be pulled in through HTML5, shared with what you do on the web, and you could have some of the same markup shared. Although at Netflix, we didn't actually share the same markup because we were iterating so fast in all 4 channels that we didn't want to be constrained by having the same code base. So just an interesting point there. Designing for all 4 of these constraints. So there's 2 experiences I'll show you, and I won't comment too much on them. This was the first PS3 experience. It had a navigation on the left, a way to go through the genres, and when it's pushed to the back and the content's up front, you can still see a ghosting of the navigation mechanism. And then you can drill into the actual movie display information. And so we're going to create one experience, right? That's all we had resources for. However, if you have product managers, that's not a problem because they'll figure out a way to create 16 experiences. We actually created 4 experiences. We only had resources for 1, but we figured out a way to do 4 because our product managers were so insistent on why we needed these 4 different experiences. Any product managers in the room? Nobody will admit it? 1. Okay, therapy afterwards? Okay, yeah, we can, yeah. So, no, it was actually a good thing. So we created 4 different experiences and some variations on each. It turned out to be 16 different tests. The second experience, which was called Plus, a little bit simpler. You lose the navigation, though. Now you just have the content. We'll talk about a little bit later which one actually won and why. Now, we could just kind of sit and look at the channels, these 4 different devices, and say, wow, there's a lot of differences between the 4. What will we do? Well, one of the good things is that what doesn't change across channels or for anything you're designing is common design principles. The same design principles. When I got started in 1984, I'm dating myself, I wrote one of the first Macintosh games, a submarine simulation. The design principles I used then are not any different than the design principles I use now. They're no different at all. Some of them have pithier names, better names. Some of them are more nuanced. The application of those have changed quite dramatically. When I was doing the game, our submarine simulation for the Mac, and designing it, the challenge was this was one of the first games that actually used a mouse and icons and windows and menus, pull-down menus. How do you create a game that's got great gameplay and uses that? It actually worked out really well. It was a fun experience, but there was really no prototypes to look at the time. There were no examples that did that, which was actually made it quite interesting, quite fun. But the design principles then are still the design principles today. So I'll talk about 3 design principles. I could talk about probably 10, but I want to keep it short because right after me comes beer. and if you stand in the way, I think I've learned this, between Brazilians and beer, you could get hurt. So I don't want to be in that situation. So I'm going to try to keep it sweet and short. How about that? 3 design principles. None of these are revolutionary, again. But getting physical, being much more about physicality. So That's my granddaughter. She's cute, isn't she? Say it. She's cute. Yes. Okay, thank you. Oh, appreciate that. Her name is Cassandra. She lives in Alaska. Her father's in Afghanistan right now. But she was staying with us because her father was in Pakistan at the time. Funny story, the other day somebody asked her, "Where's your daddy at?" And she says, "In the other stand." So she didn't know which stand it was, Pakistan, Afghanistan, one of the stands. Gotta love 4-year-olds. So she loved this game on the iPad it's called Spin Art. And Spin Art, it's like a little spirograph. It spins, and you can pick up the color, put your finger on one of the color palette, put it down, and it makes, really cool, simple art. And she that's all she wanted to do was play with Spin Art. On the iPod, the Spin Art, she would say. And then all of a sudden she got real quiet, and then she got upset. I said, "What's wrong, Cassandra?" And she came and she had her finger and she held it up and she said, "It's out of purple." She believed so strongly in the physicality of that device that she thought her finger actually got purple on it. Right? So the next statement scared me. She said, "Can I have a marker? Can I have a pen, a pen to..." "No, you can't do that on my iPad." "Here's paper. This is not paper. It may act like paper, but it's not really paper." So, it's quite interesting, the physicality of this illusion. And, when I say the word illusion, a lot of times what we're creating in a user experience is really a user illusion, right? Because nothing we create is really real. It's all just bits on the screen. And so it's like magic. In fact, if you want to have a fun study for yourself, study magic principles. Read some of the old magic books. Really some great lessons to be learned from that. From how to create an illusion, even how to write a magic book where you have to explain illusions, which is quite interesting. So the Apple Interface Guideline, I think Mike is probably in the audience somewhere cringing from Microsoft. Whenever possible, add a realistic physical dimension to your application. So this is where it gets fun, because Mike spent a good bit of time preaching against metaphors, right? He told you how evil metaphor. He was trying to see. He didn't want you to think Microsoft was evil, so he started pointing out metaphors are evil. You get it? I told him, I said, if you want people to believe that Microsoft's not evil, you need to do like Google and just create a motto that says you're not, right? I mean, that'll take care of it. Don't be evil. He didn't buy that. So I'll spend a little time talking about some of the virtues of a metaphor, but I also agree with Mike too, and I'll show you how that comes together. In fact, let's just say this. Yeah, I could agree with Mike. Let's just get rid of all metaphors. Let's get rid of Windows. Just kidding. So you can use metaphors, though, to embody physicality. Not this, though. So, the Bob that Mike talked about, it's really about, in that case, you're creating an artificial visual construction to support some idea you have. Sometimes we do it with drag and drop. We'll get excited about drag and drop, and we have to create these extra areas of the interface to drag things to or drag them out of, and when you could just click on the thing and be done with it, right? So I'm not talking about taking metaphors that far. I'm not talking about so much the visual aspect of the metaphor as I am the interaction of the physicality. On Netflix, the Roku player, which was originally the Netflix player, it was going to be a device. We actually were building it in-house. If you've seen the Roku player, it's kind of the most, CNET rates it as the best device, and others rate it as the best device out there. We spun them out of Netflix because we wanted to be a channel and not a hardware manufacturer. But we were trying to come up with what happens in a streaming environment when you're trying to get movies. You're going to movie downloaded to you in real time. You don't want this experience of start and stop. And people are not going to just want to stay in one place in it where your stream's at. They're going to want to jump forward somewhere else. How do you do that? So we came up with this mechanism called trick play. And we take every movie that we encoded, every 10 seconds, take a snapshot of the image and use that in a small thumbnail, not two sizes, but one scaled down. And you get this effect where as you go through the scrub bar, you can see where you're going to land without having to download the rest of the movie. Then once you do it, then it catches up within a couple of seconds or longer, depending on what your bandwidth is like. This is really nothing more than the film strip metaphor. You know, when you think about a film strip, you've got all the frames, and we sort of all understand that, and so it plays off of this kind of physicality of the real world. So this is where I say that, you know, metaphors in small selected areas can be very helpful. Playing off of something the user already knows is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Overdoing it and creating something that then creates a crazy experience is what Mike was talking about. I totally agree, is not the way we want to go. Now I'll use the one that he used, and I'll use it a different way. And this is a book, you know, on the iBook on the iPad. Now, the animation flipping between the pages in the book, I think, you know, I have this rule I call the cheesiness factor. In English, being cheesy is being kind of, does somebody say, what's the word in Portuguese for that? Do you know? Being cheesy? Huh? Yeah, in Portuguese, what would it be? I hate these words like this because I don't know if everybody understands what cheesy means. It doesn't mean you're eating cheese. You know, it's tired, it's old, it's kind of like not cool anymore. You know, it feels stale. You know, right? Holler it out. Brega. Ah, I spoke my first Portuguese. What did I say? Are you tricking me? I just cussed the audience out. I didn't know that. So you know, what happens in these page flipping is I think that I feel like the iBook one's a little too slow. And usually, I'll talk about this a little later, but usually with animation, you know, we want something to animate. We're always making it too slow to begin with. And it gets to be cheesy about a year later. So the cheesiness factor is whatever you do for a special effect about a year from now, it's going to feel, what was the word again? Brega. It's going to feel brega. Yeah. But the physicality of this, you know it's a book, and you probably know you can flip the pages because it follows that physical metaphor. However, on the Kindle, they have the same kind of, it's a book, you know, and but you have this thing called a location. Now, some of the content now actually has page as the Kindle apps have, you know, progressed. This is changing, but for a long time, you just had a location. And so you had this awkward thing, what location are you on? Instead of what page are you on, right? No, you don't share, well, I'm on location 4255 of 5598. And on 5624, there was a really interesting comment. It's just, you know, it's the implementation model and not the user's mental model of what a page is, right? So with the iBook, they just recalculate what a page is based on your font size. Assuming that you'll probably settle into a certain font size, it'll adjust the pages, and that'll be your experience pretty much through the reading of the book. Kindle's newer page implementation, where they show page numbers on some of the content, is based on the actual real page in the book. And if you flip 10 pages, you may be still on the same page in the physical book. Two different ways to kind of handle it. I don't know which one's the best. I have no data on that. But it's interesting that, you know, they realized they had to get past the physical, the implementation model. You know, books have pages. If you break the metaphor and put out an implementation model, you know, then what happens is you've broken the user's experience cushion. The user has a cushion, you know, with the interface, and that cushion is some of the different magic illusions that we create in the experience. But if you go with strict physicality, like Mike was talking about, having to drive down the road to get to Internetville, that's going to be a problem, right? So we want to break the metaphor often with magic. You know, we can go back to the original page. We can say how far they are in a book. You can say you're here. You can go anywhere in just by tapping. You can see how many pages are left in the chapter. These are all additional things that break the physical metaphor to create some acceleration in the interface so you can have a better experience. Strict physicality is hard work, but magic can simplify things. You're reading a book, it's a fantasy book, and the hero's in trouble. What do you expect is going to happen? Some magic, right? You don't want it to be strictly physical at that point. You want something to rescue the hero. This was in iOS 4. It's been fixed in iOS 5, but the calendar on the iPad looks like a book. Has page binding, has page depth, and when you click somewhere on this tiny little bar at the bottom, it'll flip the page and get to there. But you can't actually flick the pages. Totally broke the physical metaphor, which is totally unexpected. Now again, this was just fixed recently in iOS 5. And it creates, I can't tell you how many times on the calendar I bring it up and I try to flick. Even though I know I can't flick. Even though I've even given this talk, after giving the talk, I still want to flick the page, right? And I go, okay, what do I have to do? Oh, I have to hit that little tiny thing. What if I could use my little finger instead of this finger? I'm not as good at touch with this finger, though, and then it doesn't quite work right. Now, then we have an idiot thing like this. There's Justin Bieber. The whole world revolves around Justin Bieber. All right, okay. So watch this is ABC News World app. Do you get it? ABC News, World News. World News. Get it? Get it? Okay, good. You're slow, but you're catching up, yeah. It's probably the translation. And then notice you have to scroll a long time to get back to Justin Bieber. Where's Justin? Come on. Okay. And then you can get seasick in the interface too. So this is what I call metaphors gone wild. There's actually a video series that goes with that too, but for adults. But you know what? Sometimes the best metaphor is just the content itself. With Netflix, what we discovered was making the content more and more tangible and real itself became the most successful experiences we had. Early on the website, we used to have a little small box shot, lots of words around it, right? And then at one point we tested, we'll take the words away. Didn't even change the box shot size, but took the words away and put more content on the page. You know what? Consumption went up. We actually retained more members. We had less cancels. Can you believe that? Just from taking words away, right? Because it felt more like you had more content, a lot like the experience standing in a movie rental store where you just see the boxes. You could hover over them and get a back of the box experience and see what each movie title had. So simply content. Another is to use directness to simulate physicality. This was directness in 1984, the scroll bar. And I remember being very excited in 1984 when I got my Macintosh that I could scroll my code back and forth. It was just totally blew me away. I was in Nirvana land. I loved it. Scroll bars, still are controllers in much of our interfaces with the mouse, but in touch devices they become indicators of where you're at. So they've gone through an evolution themselves. And for going from mouse to touch, something as simple as the Twitter app, which has a lot of great interface ideas in it. Everything is done within the application itself. You don't actually go somewhere else to do things, and a lot of the management is much simpler. The second principle I want to talk about is maintaining flow. And what do I mean by flow? Flow there's a book called Flow, actually, I'd recommend, and it talks about the experience when you get mentally focused on something, how productive you become. So if you become, if you're a runner and you run for a while, there's what they call runner's glow. Everything you start getting really focused. How time will pass really fast when you're in the middle of doing something and you don't realize all this time passed. That's what flow is. It's that very focused mental energy. And that's something that we don't often let our users get too deep into without messing it up. Game time, okay? I want you to look at either screen and you're going to have to spot the differences between two images, okay? There's a flash between each one. Something changes between the two. Don't holler it out. And now, put your hand up if you're honest, please, and say if you see what it is. 1, 2, 3. Wow, usually I only get 2 or 3. I guess the audiences in Brazil are much more intelligent than the rest of the world. I got 6. 3 times as intelligent, right? Right? Don't say. I got somebody hand gesturing the answer. Now I'm going to take that little delay that was between the two images, the quarter of a second, go to black, and then the next image, and let's see how many can spot the difference now. Yeah. Okay, just to show I'm honest, I'll go back. Okay, here we go. Now spot the difference. There's still a couple of people going, I don't get it. No, it's the big engine. So this is a phenomenon called change blindness. And change blindness, your brain is wired in such a way that it expects things to be continuous and not, interrupted. So here we have the web with the page refresh, right? And so we change something, refresh the page. Nobody can see the difference between the two, right? This is what was so powerful about bringing Ajax-style technologies into the web space, is that we could take away the page refresh. We could get around the change blindness effect. So I think this is really important that a lot of people haven't really considered in designing pages, that we should remove it as much as possible. If you want another fun study, just go to Google and search for change blindness, especially on YouTube. You'll see a lot of fun videos of tricks and experiments people have played using this phenomenon. So one of the strategies to keeping the user in a flow is to reduce page switching, because when we just saw that, when we flipped the page on you, you couldn't see the difference between, or most of you couldn't see the difference in the pages. So, we were going for a cinematic experience within, this PS3 experience we called Special. We wanted to also be able to keep the navigation so the user could navigate through the experience, and then bring the content up, and then let you focus on what you've clicked on. And it follows good principles, focus plus context, simple navigation, users in control, those sort of things. And our product managers, pushed us to do one more, or several more, but this one in particular called Plus. And notice what Plus does. Plus has no navigation at all for the genres. You can't go search, you can't do any of those kind of things. All it shows you is content. And then when you click on content with the OK button on your remote control, for example, it does a page slide where it slides out a panel and lets you see the movie details, and then further slides out to show the movie itself, and you can start watching it in place and then choose to actually make it your full experience. So which one actually won? Because this one focuses on content being, is the flow, and information in context. And we test these over, 6 months or so. So this is the one that won, the simple one. And you'd think in qualitative and usability testing, people chose the first one, Special, because they wanted the ability to be able to navigate. But when we put it in A/B testing, this is the one that won. And what we have found out over and over at Netflix is that, especially in media consumption and many consumer-style apps, people are lazy. We're lazy. When you're sitting on the sofa, you really don't want to think too hard. There's that great book called Don't Make Me Think. Well, you could have the corollary is Don't Make Me Work. We tried a lot of different experiments around movie choosing and movie choosing tools, and they would all seem to fail. Now, there's still a belief at Netflix, and I believe too, that there is a way to do it, and there's constant experimentation to get there. No one at Netflix believes this is the best experience. In fact, when we changed to this experience, where's the product manager again? Is he still in the room? Okay, yes. So you know what happened? Guess what happened when we changed the experience? Yes, they wanted the product manager's head on a pike. This was what one of the comments was, Can we have the product manager drag him out in the street, chop his head off, and put his head on a pike? That was how emotional people felt about the other experience, and they were so mad at the product manager, who's a great guy. Most product managers are, right? I mean, they're just awesome guys. Yeah. But the data didn't lie. When we went to this, we actually saw more people retaining as members. We saw more consumption, more movie discovery. Now, there's got to be a solution that puts the two together, and there's experimentation going on that. These are other examples of staying without switching the page. Twitter's we showed earlier. I think most of you are familiar with this. It was interesting when I watched this little advertisement, this video. I discovered things I didn't know it did, like that. And with conversations, you could take 2 fingers and drag it open, which was interesting. Lots of different experiences to keep you within the app itself. So, content, etc. This is a pattern called page slide, and we saw it in the Netflix example that one where things could slide out. The same thing we're seeing in the Facebook, app itself, on the iPad. Interesting, the desktop Mac app, I haven't checked it recently, but notice to tweet something, I have to click the drop-down menu, and I have to say tweet, and then it pops up another menu. You have to ask yourself, why do you have to do that on a desktop app, right? Is there any reason to have a right-click menu? Is there any reason to have a separate window pop up? Well, that's the way we do it on desktops, right? Well, you don't have to, right? I mean, I think people are becoming more accustomed to things being more interactive in place, and they could probably do away with that. And there's kind of a theme here, I'll just say at the very end, where as we design across channels, we learn from these other channels and we start back applying it to the others, like to the website, and making things simpler or more cinematic. Twitter's a web app, it's follows some of the same design principles where you got the page slide kind of concept where things are sliding in and out. They're on the right-hand side on a dedicated space. This is in contrast, though, to the previous Twitter version that used this concept of hover cards. There wasn't a dedicated space on the right. Instead, there was the hover, and things came up. Now, the hover can be very valuable, but this is an example of an anti-pattern called hover and cover, right? You hover up, and you cover essential information. It also can fall into another anti-pattern. These are things you shouldn't do, anti-pattern, which is a mousetrap. So as you move your mouse around, all of a sudden things are popping up, coming up on you. So it was a great dilemma within Twitter when they were doing this, chatting with some of the folks designing this. As they were designing it, how to handle this. And this was an interim solution until they got to the page slide redesign. The last principle is just being responsive. And one of the ways you can be responsive is to create animations and transitions in the interface. So you give a little bit of feel that something's happening, moving you from one part to the next. Now, first let me talk about the abuse of this. Now, April the 15th doesn't mean the same thing. If I put this up in the United States, everybody immediately has a visceral reaction to me circling that date in April, because that's the day our taxes are due. Now I get a knowing recognition, right? So it's a time to settle up with Uncle Sam and pay the IRS. So I was doing that using TurboTax. And in particular, I want you to pay attention to this area here. And so I was experimenting with, if I bought a house and had mortgage interest, so you can take off the interest for your mortgage on your house, your loan, and it lowers your tax rate. So I was playing around with, well, if I bought a house this next year, what would it do to my taxes? Now watch the number there in the left-hand corner. Stay focused on it. All right? You see what it did? I'll show it to you in slow motion. 10,000, 16,000, 98,000, 33,000, 53,000, 31, 14, 80, 39, 9. Why? Why did it do that? I had so many heart attacks all night long. I mean, every time I changed something, doing taxes, it was like midnight. I was like, oh my God, I owe $100,000. Jeez, don't do that to my heart. It's too gentle here. Somebody at TurboTax, I actually found out how it came about. It was a product manager. It was a product manager. Yeah. It's your day, isn't it? I'm sorry. It's insane. I guess I could see it on the refund side if I'm getting money back, but to rub it in. Now, this may not translate so well here in Brazil, but there's a TV show this reminded me of in the States. It's called Biggest Loser. And the idea is they really, really, really heavy people, like 400, 500 pounds, 350, whatever. They go on the show and they go through a regimen and they lose weight throughout the time, and most of them end up, being really trim and slim at the very end. But they get on the scale, and to create the drama, the scale goes up and down, until finally it lands. However, it's a better experience than Intuit TurboTax because it gives you the difference, at least, even though I think it's still silly, right? So these are examples of animation. Occam said this many, many years ago, 500, 600, 700 years ago. What can be done with less is done in vain with more. And Edward Tufte said, make all visual distinctions as subtle as possible, but still clear and effective. And we can do that with interaction too, with animation. Here's NASA.gov. They think that you have to animate menus. Can we never animate another menu, please? Okay? If you try real hard, you can get 3 of these down at once. That's the most I've been able to do, and I challenge you to get 4. If you do, please send me something on Twitter or email and let me know. I've never been able to do it. There's no reason for this. This is unnecessary, needless animation. I call it needless fanfare. I get it. When I click that, it drops down. I don't need the animation to show me that it happened. And Flex and Flash are some of the biggest offenders, right? I had to do an example app for Adobe. I was consulting a year or so back, and to showcase Flex 4. And we had this kind of tension between them wanting to put every animation trick in the app and me wanting to turn them down, So this is Bear Paint, which is a paint manufacturer, and everything has to be slow and slide up and have opacity you can see through and all this. This is not what animation is really meant to do because it comes front and center. I met a guy who does motion graphics at an LA bar. You can learn a lot in an LA bar in Los Angeles, and a bar, when people get toasted enough. So he said to me that when he's doing commercials, he adjusts the luminance and the timing effects. When he gets done, he cuts it in half. He cuts it in half by 50%. He said that because when you get so focused on doing any kind of effect, you overemphasize it, and you kind of lose the larger scope. So that's been a good rule of thumb. And my co-author to my book says, and then cut it in half again, because she doesn't trust people who put these effects in. She's a little more cynical than I am, which is kind of hard, but she is. So my snarky answer, I blame it on Flash, but it's really, that we get captivated by these things and become cheesy later. And then animation, though, can be really good. It can reveal relationships. It can improve the perception of responsiveness. It can show state change, and it can focus your attention somewhere. It can create delight, and it can simulate physicality. So it actually has a lot of value. In touch devices, you'll notice that the animation is tied directly to the physical action you're doing. Whereas in web-style interfaces, often it's lagging to tell you something because, it's your hand versus the mouse, the direct versus the indirect. And so I think we see a little less abuse on touch devices because we've got those things connected closer together. So TV experiences, this is our TV experience, most recent one at Netflix. And this was the Netflix site about 6 months ago. And so you can see that there's a good bit of white space. Notice all the white space in between here. The box shots aren't that big. There's a big area here to let people rate something and get some other suggestions back. It doesn't feel as content-oriented, does it? learning from the TV experience, seeing how important it was to have really big box shots, to have the media be up and center, up front, they begin to test this experience, which basically goes a long way. It's like the Amazon homepage where you can scroll forever, right? And you just see content. And you can also go left or right. And this tested much better than the previous website. Again, without having the TV experience to constrain and to think about design, this experience would have never come about on the website. It was directly reflected from the learnings on the TV. And I think we'll see more and more of that. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. And you can see a bunch of information there. I'll make the PDF available also to the conference. And we can open up for questions. Whoops. Let's see. Thank you.